Now I'm going to do something really fun for you today, and I know I say that a lot on here, but this time it really is. I'm going to tie another pattern that a viewer sent in. And when I received this one, I saw this picture and I immediately said, we've got to tie this one for the channel. Now this pattern came from Glen Sims of Missouri. Now he is an outboard motor tech on the Lake of the Ozarks, right smack dab in the middle of Missouri. And he's been fishing and tying for at least 50 years. He said his grandfather taught him, and get this, he taught his daughter when she was old enough to start fishing. So they've been tying and fishing for many years now. And together they came up with this pattern, which really it's a variation of a Coachman Trude, but instead of a golden pheasant tippets for a tail with a red band and brown hackle, it's got Lady Amherst tippets for a tail and a white band and Grizzly hackle. So it's definitely a different enough pattern to have its own name, and they call it the Dalmatian Trude. Now I think that is a great name for a pattern like this because basically if it wasn't for the peacock herl, it would be an entirely black and white fly. Okay, now before we get into the tie, I do want to ask something of you. And I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to anyway. So a lot of y'all know, or I've mentioned it before, my to-do list, it's a bunch of index cards on a corkboard over there, and it's always between 15 to 25 long. And some of the patterns on there, they've been there for a year or more. I know David Clunk, I'm going to get to your squirrel zipper someday. I really want to do that one. And Ryan, the Piccadilly flies, we're going to make those someday too. But what I want to ask today is if any of y'all have patterns out there that you've come up with, you've created, you've fished them, they do well for you. Maybe you've given them a name or maybe not. But if you've got anything out there like that, I'd love to see it. If you could just email those to me, a picture of it, maybe the recipe, I'd love to start tying these up for the channel. Now I've done this on several videos in the past and we're about to do one today, but there's a couple of reasons I want to do this. And really the first one, it's just a lot of fun. It's fun for me to see what y'all come up with out there and what you create and what works well in your waters. And really the second reason is I'm kind of soliciting input for my first book. I want a chapter in that talks about, local patterns that work all across the country that were created by, non-professional fly tyers, folks like me and you. And I think that would just be a really interesting part of the book. Now, if you email me a picture of a fly that you've created, I can't guarantee that we'll get it tied up for the channel. I mean, I'm thinking if 1,000 people see this video, I could easily get 50 emails of patterns out there. People say, hey, tie this one. So I'd like to, and maybe we can work through a lot of them. But yeah, I ask you, if you've got anything like that, please send it in and we'll try to get it tied. So that's it for my request. Let's get into today's pattern, Glen and Amber Sims, Dalmatian Trude. So there it is in the vise, the Dalmatian Trude, created by Glen and Amber Sims. Don't you just love this thing? Black and white, pretty much with a little hint of the green and gold with the peacock right there. Now I'm going to tie this on a size 14. This is a 1X long dry fly hook. You could tie it on a standard length, but you just have to mind your proportions because there is a lot going on this thing. And I'm going to use some white thread. I'll lay a base down to the start of the bend. And for the tail, these Lady Amherst tippets, I've got a bunch right there, already about the right size I want. Let's get these caught in. I don't really care if that second black bar is showing. If it is, great, but I don't want real long of a tail, so let's just catch this in and see what we've got right here. Okay, I think that is a good length right there. And we do have a little bit of that bar showing. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's just do some loose wraps to bind this in right here. Now here's a tip for this part. We've got a 3-part body. Peacock herl, white floss, and then peacock herl. And you might be tempted to make each one of those about a third. A third the length of the body. But don't do that. You will quickly run out of room. And I learned that about 10 minutes ago when I was trying this. So that, where my thread is right there, that's probably a little bit farther up than I want even. So I'm going to wrap this back band to where my thread is hanging. So I'll do 2 open wraps right there just to temporarily get it out of the way. Now let's put 5 or 6 wraps right here just to give us a little bit, the hint of peacock on the butt here. Okay, that's really all I want. Back this up 2 wraps and catch it off. I'm gonna do 2 wraps, pull my thread a little tight, now I can just break that off. Oh, watch the point of your hook. Just advance your thread a little bit more forward. Now it's catching some white floss. Now Glen did say that he will use white thread for this, but I'm using a pretty thin thread and it would take an awful lot of wraps, so I'm just gonna go ahead and use some white floss. And again, this part, maybe a little bit less than 1/3 of the body. Let it get flat on you if you want, but you're gonna want at least 2 layers because this white certainly gets translucent when it gets wet. So I want this band to be, you know, a little bit thinner than the Peacock herl, but not real wide. So I think that's probably as wide as I want it right there. I'm gonna back that thread up 1 turn, and let's catch this off right here. Now this same piece of Peacock herl, just gonna catch it in right back up the front here. Loose wrap right there so I can pull it down so I don't have to trim the tip. Okay, I think that's gonna be fine. I'm gonna wrap this from back here to about where my thread is hanging. Okay, put some tension on my thread and break that off. Now here's something to note. This wasn't the highest quality herl. I probably should have picked a better piece because that front looks just a little bit matted. Now, I could have probably been more diligent in making sure I wrapped it with the smaller herl side toward the hook, but you know, I didn't, and I think we're gonna be fine. Now the next thing we're gonna catch in is this Trude wing and calftail, and that's a big clump right there. What I'll do on a fly like this, I will cut at least twice as much calftail as I need, because I'm not gonna be able to stack this. And what I'll do, if there are any really long hairs, I'll just pull them out manually, 1 at a time. In this case, there aren't really, so I'm just gonna grab it by close to the tips and then pull out the short hairs. And what I've done here is I've really thinned this probably by half. So that's about how much I'm gonna be tying on right there. So measure your length, I'd say to the bend of the hook, maybe halfway down the tail right there. Switch hands, my thread is already hanging at the back of where I want this head to be. I'm gonna do a pinch wrap right there and not let my thread go forward on it. I'm gonna take a few tight wraps going back. Now this will bind the thread or the hair close to the shank, which we don't really want, but what we do here, see that's laying a little bit too flat. What I'm gonna do here, I've got about 4 or 5 pretty tight wraps holding it in, so I can lift this up and put a wrap under it. And if that doesn't prop it up enough, in this case I think it did, but I'll show you what you can do. Instead of going around the hook, go around this hair again, and what we will have effectively done is put 1 complete wrap just around the hair. I'm making a little bit of a mess of this one right here. Oh, that happens. So did I get a wrap just around the hair? I think I did in the end. It was not pretty getting there, but I think we got it. So now a couple tight wraps. I've got plenty of thread wraps holding this wing in place. I should be able to snip this off up here pretty close without getting in the way of my eye. And what you can do here, if you do get up really close to your eye, just kind of push this up and maybe trim it a little bit more. I don't think I need to right here, so I'm just going to take some thread wraps and bind those tips in, and I'm trying to smooth this area right here. I've got that spinning around on me again. So I think I'm gonna have to go back and put 1 more wrap up under it. I've lost a few of those fibers, a few of those hairs right there, so that wing is a little bit thinner than I wanted, but let's go ahead and finish this fly. I think we can still make a fishable fly out of it. All right, now for my hackle, I'm gonna use some pretty decent Grizzly hackle. This is a whiting, high and dry, and take a look at this. It's pretty thick right here on the fat side, but it quickly goes down to a size 10, 12, and pretty quickly gets down here to a 14, and I think the rest of this feather is about a 14. But what you can do if you don't have a hackle gauge or don't feel like getting it out, I'll just pull this around right there and say, okay, that might be a little longer than I want. Let me pull it around until I'm getting some shorter fibers, maybe right there. Now that is going to be my catch-in point. Now one thing I like to do on a dry fly like this, if you can see this, I have stripped some of the barbs off, more of the barbs off on one side than the other. And the side that I've stripped them off is the one that's going to be wrapped first and closest to the hook. So let's see, a couple wraps right there. I think that is going to be fine. Now a few more wraps just to bind this stem in. Now I think I've got enough wraps holding this hackle in that I can wrap this, and my goal here is really about maybe 5 wraps, and to keep these fibers coming off perpendicular to the hook, one wrap right in front of the other. Okay, that's 5 wraps of this hackle. Catch it off with a couple of thread wraps right here. Now what I like to do, just pull these back a little bit, not real far. I'm not trying to make a swept back hackle, but just far enough where I can make a few extra wraps right here and get room for my whip finish. And my goal on my whip finishes is usually not to trap any of those fibers going forward, but I did 2 right there. So either grab your tweezers and pluck those out, or just snip them and call it done. Alright, a little bit more cleanup, but you get the picture. So there you go, Dalmatian Trude. I think this is a really cool looking fly. Now my major flaw in this one, I let that wing get a little bit too thin on me. But overall it's a fishable fly, and so just keep that in mind if you tie it for yourself. So I appreciate you watching, everybody. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next time.